Special thanks to the K Family Foundation, lead underwriters for Mosaic. Hello, my name is Barbara Kay, and on behalf of the Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County, I'd like to welcome you to our program, Mosaic. Our special focus on Mosaic today is the peace process in the Middle East and the challenge of radical Islamism. Our special guest in the first segment is the Executive Director of the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, historian, author, very special man, Dr. Robert Satloff. We'll be back with our guest and our program right after this brief message.
Thanks to your support, Federation maintains the fabric of the Jewish community. By enabling our community to remain vital and vibrant today and for future generations.
Mentoring more than 400 at-risk children through the Youth Futures program in Federation's partnered communities of Israel's Tzachar region.
Providing a wealth of social, welfare, spiritual and educational services available to the 110,000 members of the Jewish community in St. Petersburg, Russia.
We touch so many and do so much. Your dollars fund the work of our Federation. Thank you for your generous support.
Welcome back to Mosaic in Florida. It's such a pleasure to have you here, Dr. Satloff.
Pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
You know, I introduced you as the Executive Director of the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, and I think it would be interesting for our viewers to get a little bit of an understanding of what the Washington Institute does. So can you share that with us?
Absolutely.
I knew you'd be happy to do that.
The Washington Institute is all about improving the quality of American policy in the Middle East. It's raising the standards, improving it, making sure that we execute what we say we're going to do, and giving our government the ideas, the analysis, the recommendations to make that happen. We have the broadest and most expert group of scholars on every issue that's important for America in the Middle East. We have them at our office, and we provide a second opinion to our government on every issue that matters. That's our goal. That the government, the US government, cannot make an important decision with at least checking with our experts. They don't always take the advice. If they did, there'd be peace in our time. But they have to take our analysis into account.
So actually, literally, how do you work? You do research, and then you present information.
We have a broad array of experts do research on everything from the peace process to Iran, to counterterrorism, to the nuclear problem, to you name it. And we engage with government at the highest level, sometimes the President, the Secretary of State, intelligence agencies, the Department of Defense, across the board, but we also engage in the public debate. So we publish, we appear on television, we engage with the media, we try to educate journalists and diplomats about the issues. So we try to engage in all aspects of what I call the circle of access and influence to affect the policy making of our government.
Well, you certainly have had an impact. I mean, look, Dennis Ross came out of the Washington Institute, and the position that he has now with the administration is not insignificant. As a matter of fact, I listened to him speak at one of your meetings just recently on the Middle East process.
Right. Now, Dennis is our most newsworthy alumnus, but we have dozens of people in every arm of government that came through the Institute, in the military, in the intelligence agencies, State Department, White House, you name it. And they all come out with a certain approach to how you solve problems in the Middle East. Yeah. And we hope that improves the way we can perform in this part of the world.
Okay, you said the magic word, the Middle East, okay? The situation at present. I wouldn't mind if you could give us an overview of where we're at. Is there a solution? Will there be a solution? You maybe that's a tall order, but let me see what you feel about it. How you feel about it?
Well, it's a very big question for
I know, big question.
a brief answer.
Okay.
We're at a very strange moment. Large majorities of Israelis and Palestinians both want, or at least they say they want, the same outcome: a redivision of historic Palestine into two states, a Jewish state of Israel and a Palestinian state. Both sides say they want it by large majorities, and the same large majorities also say that they don't think it's going to happen, that they don't think, they have no confidence in the negotiations, that their leaders aren't up to making the big decisions, that they don't think it's going to happen. This is the paradox of this peace process. And America's role, and we've done a pretty poor job the last couple of years, America's role is to find a way to translate the commonality of the objective and overcome the resistance and the lack of confidence. Regrettably, I think, we have made matters worse the last couple of years by distracting negotiations by this focus on an Israeli settlement freeze, instead of really getting the parties to focus on what matters, which is a real face-to-face negotiation for peace. And I think the problem is now, 2 years later, we have nothing to show for our effort.
Well, you know, somebody, I think it was Dan Meridor, said something about the fact that the peace process is like riding a bicycle. Once you stop pedaling, you fall off. So we can't stop doing what we're doing. But obviously, when you have two partners that don't trust each other, how do you develop and establish trust to have peace?
Well, the first thing to do is to get them to start talking with each other, is to promote real face-to-face negotiations. And regrettably, what we have done in the last 2 years is we have built an impediment. We have said that there can't be negotiations until there's an Israeli settlement freeze, even though for the last 17 years they had negotiations without such a freeze. This is not to say that Israeli settlement policy is brilliant or the right thing to do, but it's something that needs to be resolved in negotiations, not by fiat from Washington. And the problem, therefore, is that we created an obstacle. Now, there's a bigger context, which I think is very important to point out, which is Iran. Iran hovers over this entire negotiation. And as long as there's doubt about American intention regarding Iran's nuclear program, as long as people in the Middle East aren't convinced that we are really committed to stopping this, they're going to hold back from any serious negotiation.
You know something, it's a myth, but nonetheless, it's you know, what perception is 95% of reality. And one of the things that was being bandied around was the fact that the situation in Iran would never be solved until the Middle East peace process was solved. And
well, we always knew, some of us always knew that this was a total falsehood. Now, as we read the details from WikiLeaks, we see how much of a falsehood it really is. We can see how many leaders, one after another in Arab country and Arab capital, tell America, cut off the head of the snake, do what you have to do regarding Iran. And they don't even mention the issue between Israelis and Palestinians. It is not just secondary, it's tertiary for many leaders. It's important for public opinion, but in reality, the most important thing they want us to do is to deal with the Iran problem. Now, the Israelis want us to deal with the Palestinian problem too, because they live with it. But it's not because there's a linkage that if only we solved the Palestinian problem, then we'd have the yellow brick road to solving the problem with Iran. Absolutely not. If anything, the linkage is the other way. Solve the Iran problem, and Hamas loses strength, Hezbollah loses strength, and it's a lot easier to deal with the problems between Israelis
okay, but so
and Palestinians.
now you're putting a major impediment in place of trying to establish peace, because the situation in Iran, which we're going to discuss later on the program, is enormously difficult and could be disastrous if it's not handled properly.
Right. I don't say that we wait to solve the Iran problem. I say we deal with both tracks in parallel. We do what we can on one while we pursue the other. But let's not think that if we only solve the Palestinian issue, that's going to address the nuclear problem in Iran. They don't care.
I read somewhere something, Dr. Satloff, I think a piece that you wrote, about perhaps if we attack the peace process in a different way, from the Palestinian point of view, from the bottom up, and from the Israeli viewpoint, from the top down. In other words, the leadership in Israel and maybe the economic situation amongst the Palestinians. Maybe that would be a way to solve something. What do you think?
Well, I think one needs to do both. Top down is traditional diplomacy. Bottom up is building the foundation for progress. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
The last 2 years have witnessed almost zero terrorism against Israelis coming out of the West Bank. Next to none. Now just imagine how big a change this is from where we were 10 years ago when bombs were going off, killing innocents all the time. And you have to ask yourself why. Now, partially because the Israeli army still operates in parts of the West Bank, but that's only part of it. The other part is the Palestinian security forces are now acting responsibly. They're stopping terrorists. They're implementing law and order. And everybody likes it. Israelis like it, and Palestinians are happy that gangs aren't running through the streets of their cities. This is very positive. We need to encourage these sorts of trends. With law and order comes economic vitality. Palestinian economy had a better year than America did. Of course, that wasn't so difficult. But they had a great year last year, 8% growth. We should encourage this. This will help build the foundation for traditional diplomacy. And we need to do both. And we need to be more creative in trying to make it happen.
Okay, well, at least that's some opportunity, perhaps. Well, you're here for a special reason. The Washington Institute is having a special symposium on the challenge of radical Islamism. And there are two generals that you brought into town. It's not often that we have two generals in town.
Right.
First of all, explain to our viewers what the symposium is going to be about and who our next guests will be.
Sure. This symposium is an opportunity to look at a very pernicious threat, which is growing up all over the world, in towns and villages and cities, in Muslim countries as well as in the West, a different pace and a different evolution in different places, but the threat is linked around the world, and this is the threat of radical Islamism. This is an ideological movement that seeks to control Muslims and seeks to control societies more generally. So we are focusing on this because of the very serious danger it poses to our interests and the interests of our allies around the world. Partially in terms of terrorism, which everybody worries about, but it's much broader than just terrorism. It's really a more global ideological challenge. I'm delighted that we brought two generals. I know Palm Beach area is full of people who think they're in charge, but we brought two generals.
Two generals, yes.
One is General Michael Hayden, who was the former director of Central Intelligence, the CIA director, former Air Force general. And the other is General Michael Herzog, Israeli, who's the chief of staff to 4 different Israeli defense ministers and has been involved in every aspect of Israel's national security for more than a decade. So together they're going to give an American, international, Middle Eastern view on the challenge of radical Islamism and, more importantly, what we should do about it.
Okay, on that note, I'm going to thank you, Rob Satloff, Dr. Satloff, for coming. It's a pleasure.
Wonderful to see you again, Barbara.
We'll take a break and we'll be back with the remainder of our program right after this brief message.